You are listening to Middle East Monitor Conversations, bringing you lively discussions with prominent voices from the region and beyond, as we delve deeper into issues shaping the Middle East and North Africa, from politics, the culture, and the arts.
Hello, welcome to MEMO Conversations. I'm video producer Osman Butt. Over the last week, Syrian opposition forces led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, have launched an offensive against the regime of Bashar al-Assad and his forces, capturing towns, villages, and cities across northern Syria, including Syria's second largest city, Aleppo. But what is actually happening? Why is it happening now? And who is involved? Joining us today to answer this question is Hussam Hammoud. Hammoud is a Syrian journalist who specialises in the Syrian conflict and beyond it. He is known for his field reporting and focusing on human rights, highlighting stories from the war zone and displacement crisis in both Syria and Ukraine. His work has mostly appeared on the European Cultural Chanal ARTE. Sam, welcome to Memo Conversations.
Thanks so much, Osman, and thank you for this host and such a sensitive time.
So before we sort of get into the events of the last week and questions around who HDS is and everything that is involved in all of this, I wonder if we could start about talking about yourself. Because as I mentioned in the intro, you are a Syrian journalist. I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about your journey in Syria to where you became a reporter and why you became interested in covering these sorts of issues when, a lot of people could have done many other things. Why did you choose to do this?
Yeah, mainly so we can start from 2011 because for Syrians it's a new birth year. All the lives that were before 2011, most of them were just like changing with the start of the Syrian revolution. So as any Syrian was there at that time, I began to take the line of people. I wouldn't say just like even revolution because like it was a lifestyle more for this. So in 2011, I was studying at the university for like 2 years. Then I need to quit my university in Homs because being wanted for the Syrian regime. After 2012, I stayed at my hometown, which is like known as Raqqa. Uh, for 2013, Raqqa was out of Assad control. FSA and other opposition armed groups controlled the city. So it was like the first experience that controlling a city back then. Like after 2013, after March 2013, to be more specific, it happened that it was the first city center under the control of the opposition. So it was a new experience for the revolutionary people there. Tried to work back then just to see like what kind of things that we can do in a new liberated city back then. There were a lot of armed groups. We didn't take that time for enjoying that achievement because like ISIS or known as the Islamic State in Iraq and Sham, they took control in the city in 2014. I need to flee my city with the first day of their control in the on the city. Well, we were wanted also by the Islamic State as none, because like the Islamic State it defined nothing regarding someone who believed in the revolution. They were also harmful for the revolution as Assad regime was, because they picked to fight the revolutionary people first. So back then, I flee to Derzor. It was a new phase of me involving in the revolution because back then I need even to get involved in the armed revolution against Assad and against ISIS for some months because like back then it was just like a lot of things happened. It was like a matter of life or death. Then in 2015, I started my journey in journalism as not the choice to start to be a journalist because we weren't seeing it as a journalist or something like this. It was just like as someone originally from Raqqa, you are seeing your city name just like on the headlines of many international media talking about the city. Most of the time, it's mistaken information. Now, that city that was known as the capital of revolution or the capital of the liberation, since it was the first city, now you are just like seeing it painted with all of that blackness that I brought with them. So back then, I was in contact with many family members, friends, and the news was just like flooding to me. At that point, since you are just like, I was in Daraa. I moved to Daraa, in the southern of Syria, and there was nothing to do except just like delivering this kind of information that's flooding to naturally to the world outside. So back then, I started working for some Syrian media for a couple of years. Then I start like in 2017. I get back to Raqqa after ISIS were exiled out of the city. I start working as a field fixer for some international media, including Le Monde, Acte, that I'm working with mostly today. Uh, then it was another thing under the control of the Syrian Democratic Forces. Also, like we lived for 2 years. In 2019, I need to flee the city with the change of the American policies in the area to flee Syria after 8 years of living in war context to Turkey, where I stayed like for 2 years. Back then, I also worked like as a journalist. I started working slowly as a journalist, and also like as a fixer for New York Times also back then. And I also like wrote some articles for The Guardian. I was working for Middle East Eye back then. Also, and for Mediapart, which is like a political French website, investigative one. In 2022, I moved to France, where I'm back. I'm based now.
That's you've obviously got a wealth of experience.
Used to contain like more than 4 million people, and we are not talking about like we are talking not about a whole city. We're talking about the city center of Idlib and the northern, some parts of the western, and some part of the eastern countryside of Idlib. The southern countryside was already under the Assad region control. So at some point, yes, there was some planning for a new operation, little operation. Like I remember, like 2 months ago, I was talking with one of a friend that I know that he's a fighter also, like in one of the groups right now. And he was just like, okay, we were talking in video, and he was just like printing maps and everything. And I was asking him that, what you are doing? And he was just like, we're planning for the battle. And I was just like, should we believe this? Because like it wasn't even expected that a new battle is going on, especially after all of this time. And he was just like, we need to do what's needed. That's the idea. Even him, when I talked with him after 27th of November, and he was just like, Hassan, I cannot even imagine that it's actually started. We were trying just like to do our duty, but like we couldn't imagine that all of this is going on right now. So with the start of the military operation 2027 November, we're talking about a massive thing. And so like a whole changing of the controlling maps. Especially that we are talking if we are talking about like the nature of the city that it's being taken now. Especially if we want to be more specific, that we're talking about a full area is controlled, which like Idlib right now. Idlib wasn't before the 27th of November. It wasn't fully controlled by the rebels. We're talking about like Aleppo, which like now it's like there's still a small part controlled by the SDF, not even the regime, from inside the city itself. Hay Sheikh Maqsood or Sheikh Maqsood neighborhood there. And I think like now since they're isolated, they already start to withdraw from the area. So like it's a matter I think it's a matter of days that we are seeing what can talk about the whole of Aleppo city is under the control of rebels. We're talking about like massive also like advance that is being made in Hama, and I want to be more specific about this point because like the region was in shock. Iranian militias weren't prepared for such things, especially of what was happening by supporting Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Iranian militia in Syria, they sent a lot of reinforcements to support Hezbollah and their battle. I wouldn't say even support Lebanon because that was a different battle. That it was the battle of Hezbollah itself. back then. So as the biggest Iranian ally in the area for Hezbollah, they send a lot of Iranian militia that were located in Syria, especially in the north of Syria, northwest. They sent them to support that battle. So Assad regime back then was completely isolated. There was an agreement with Russia, or I think that it was a post agreement because Russia didn't that agree about the giving the Iranians in South Syria all of that power. So that's why we can say that on the ground Russia isn't supporting that much in this. But so all of these factors just let the Assad regime alone. Back we can say that it literally back to the state that it was in 2030 where the rebels were controlling more than 80% of Syria because Assad regime was isolated back then. And now it's happening the same thing. The Assad regime was completely shocked after 27th of November. That what made a lot of losses for on the ground, especially in Aleppo and the countryside. Because if we're talking about the map itself, Assad regime isn't controlling all the isn't trying to control all the towns, especially in the countryside. It's mainly based on divisions or operation or military based. So the rebels, when they start this, they try to focus on those kind of strength points of the regime, taking them out of the battle and then controlling the town itself, controlling even the city itself. If you are taking out the main military bases, it was quite easy. Now in Hama, the battle start to be tough. That's why the advancements are being slowly taken, but that doesn't mean that it's not on the controlling map. If we're talking about control maps, the worst thing that rebels are trying to entering the city now from two sides, mainly from the north of the city. Uh, and now on one of the exit door, it's just 1 kilometer from the city center of Hama. So we're talking about massive thing. It will not be like the advancing event the same way that happened in Aleppo or the rest of Idlib countryside. But we are talking now about two operations. It's happening mainly the non-military operation room that we have heard about their name after 27 November. They were fighting on Hama, and there was opened another battle also to fight in the northern of Aleppo and in the eastern of Aleppo against the forces of SDF. So this is just quick explaining for the controlling map that we barely could follow up with it from outside. By the way, even for Syrians, so a lot of news just are floating and a lot of actors are involved. What we heard about the name and we are quite surprised every time that we are hearing just the name of Hayat Tahrir Sham, but on the ground there are more than 26 armed groups are fighting under the same thing. So we are just quite surprised about what's happening on the ground and what we are hearing here.
Yes, it's an interestingly fast-moving situation. I mean, I think the fact that, for our audience who may remember this, in 2016, Aleppo the city was physically divided between those who, the regime-controlled areas, which, included different militia groups with the regime as well. Eastern Aleppo was under oppositional different rebel groups' control. And, this was the state of play up until 2016, when eventually the regime launched an offensive backed almost entirely by Russian air power and particularly Iraqi militia groups, expelled the rebel fighters, but also a large chunk of the residents of East Aleppo. And it felt like that was a very low moment for people who supported this Syrian revolution in general, regardless of what they thought of the rebel groups themselves, because it's it's the symbol of what could be, right? And then all of a sudden, in less than 72 hours, not just East Aleppo, the whole of Aleppo falls. So if we can just go back to Aleppo for a moment, Why do we think it fell so quickly? What is the sort of, things you're hearing, and why did the regime seemingly give up so easily?
Yeah, I think that I would start with the main important point right now, since you make that comparing with 2016. Let's talk about 2016. A lot of mistakes that happened back then. Yes, the rebels were inside the city, inside parts of the city, but like mainly if we are talking about like that mentality of the armed groups back to 2016 was more about gaining power more than fighting for the revolution itself. So you have just like a lot of armed groups, including the names that we are hearing today, like Noordin Zinki, including HTS. Back then, it was just like still a Nusra, Jabhat al-Nusra. And we are having Ahrar Sham, which is also like another project that all of them were trying to make two things back 2016, defending against the regime, but like on the ground, they were trying also to gain power. Today, battle, it's completely different, and that's what I found it like quite making more progress. Today, battle is just like managed by the people of the cities who just like fed up of living under the bombing, being displaced in the camps in Idlib in such a tiny area, just like being displaced in tents. The economic situation is quite bad. They needed their homes. So now, even if they are fighting under the same names, but like the motivation of the fighters themselves is quite different. They want to get back, and this is what we are seeing in the videos that we are seeing after the rebels get inside the city. Most of the faces are familiar. Most of the faces are people from Aleppo who are just like craving coming back to their area. So today's city is not about today battle. Sorry, it's not about like controlling. It's not about taking more lands to control. It's not about like just like supporting the revolution. It's really a screaming thing about like people who fed up for 6 years, were bombed, were killed, and they couldn't do a move. So today, it's their chance to make a move. Fighting with this mentality, with this ideology, it's quite different, especially with the factors that I mentioned earlier, that Assad regime isn't living their best status. So like all of this is just like happened that inside Aleppo city, which like Assad regime in the past years, they give the most power inside the city itself to the Iranian militias. So you couldn't see a lot of army soldiers, like Syrian army soldiers inside the city because they weren't controlling the whole city. Most of the areas, like if we're talking about like Salah ad-Din or other neighborhoods inside the area, which like it's so livable, uh, they were controlled by the militias, by Iran. So like you have that gap, especially after the 7th of October, since those militias were withdrawn and were redirected to Lebanon and also to east of Syria to attack some US military bases there. So they lost that strength point in Aleppo, which led Assad regime out of the ability of fulfilling that gap. That was the main reason that when they were fighting in Aleppo, and that's what we saw, like in a lot of videos, that after getting inside the military bases or something like this, we saw that the slogans and the flags of Iran is quite even more than the Syrian one. It gives an indication that the city was controlled by the Iranians who led it. So like with that gap, I think it helped the revolutionary so fast to take control more on the city and fast way. And you have also like another factor that played. There were a lot of people inside Aleppo who were just like fed up. They were tired of being controlled by Assad, not only for revolutionary reasons, but also for the economic bad situation that they were living, the bad lifestyle that they were living. There was no electricity, there was no water. It was just like cutting like more than 16 hours per day. And this is what we are noticing that yesterday we were doing just like some interviews with people on the ground. And we are just like asking them like about what they feel. The first thing that people mention that now we feel stable, which like is so important to hear from someone from the ground, and they say that it's better service. It has been like 5 days only, and people on the ground, they were able to notice that things are getting better. I'm not gonna get inside that it's now great and everything. No, there's still like a lot of things that are going on. But like I'm just like arguing about like thinking on the mentality of someone on the ground from Aleppo. Like if I want to start something that I want to start that they don't care about like who rules the city since they live good.
Yeah, that's it's an interesting point as well, because that is something I did see as well being written online, that Aleppo hasn't had 17 hours of electricity or thereabouts since 2012 or 2013, and within a few days, after the rebels took the city, there's now suddenly 17 hours of electricity, which I think they're redirecting power away from the factories or something like this. But just a little change, and something as small as that really does impact the way people feel about things. But also, from what we are hearing, obviously Iran's militias have been pulling out, but now there seems to be a little bit more of a fight for Hama. Um, but I do know that within the Hama region, it's not just militia groups. There's also tribal groups as well fighting. The Assad regime traditionally had an ally in the particular tribes that lived around the Hama, not necessarily in the city itself, but in the region that they call upon fighting. What do we know about this? Are they calling upon these groups, or is it just groups coming from elsewhere to fight for the regime?
There was something so sensitive and so major that happened 3 days ago, if you heard about it, and of course everyone heard about it, that the attempt of coup, the military coup inside Damascus. That was so risky for the Iranians because the last footage that we have from Damascus also like in big parts, it's the capital of Iranian militias right now. And it's controlled by Hezbollah, it's controlled by Iranians and everyone, especially areas like Zainab. And what happened there, mainly back then, there was no military coup from inside the army itself. But some of the former FSA groups, that especially in Madaya and other Ghouta areas, they tried to do something. They are still planning for it up to this moment, but like they tried just like to do something which like it was alarming for Iranians back then. So that's why they pulled out most of their militia that they were in Lebanon, and also they were in Iraq. And also they brought some reinforcements from Tehran itself, especially the military leadership one. So now we are just like having a new IRGC leadership for the operation that's happening now, and Iranians are acting seriously right now. And Jawad Ghaffari is the name of the big head of the Iranian militia that is coordinating right now all the things for the Iranian militias. And that guy was also like he had like a big experience in Syria because like back to 2019 he was moved back to Iran. But like he was a close friend of Qasem Soleimani, he know all the tactics and all the military map because like he was fighting back 2017 in Deir Zor and in the Syrian desert against ISIS, and he also like fought in Aleppo itself. So now such a person managing all of this, we can say that a new Qasem Soleimani is being done right now. So that's why we are seeing the shiftings in the Iranian military uh, style right now. So yes, they are pushing a lot of forces inside Hamas right now. They also control, like, take the leadership of big parts of the Assad army, which, like, for example, like the 25 division inside the Syrian army or the Assad army, it's now controlled by the Iranians. It followed the orders from the Iranian, from IRGC. So that's why like, we can say that their front line is more organized now, which reflect on the area, on the battle itself, that it's being more tough right now. But like despite that, we're talking about like tougher area. And tougher battleground right now, rebels are being able to make more advanced right now, especially in Hama.
How big do we think the rebel forces are in total? What do we think roughly their numbers are in terms of manpower that they're putting into this battle?
Yeah, thanks for asking this question because it's so important to to just like explain what's happening right now and under the slogan of the military operations. So the military operations room, as it was noted, it's the leadership. It's for Hayat Tahrir Sham, but like under this name, there is a lot of groups that are fighting right now in two different battles. The most of the groups we're talking about like more than in total more than 50,000 fighters are fighting from different groups, and those groups are quite the fire for the ideology that they have, the motivations that they're fighting for, even the fighting style that they have. So if we want to just like talk about like the groups that are fighting Hayat Tahrir Sham, which like it's formerly Al-Nusra, it's formerly Al-Qaeda inside Syria. Back 2016, they just like decide to revoke their agreement with Al-Qaeda still, but like that doesn't mean that the ideology changed a lot. Because like if we're talking about like Hayat Tahrir Sham or HTS, since the beginning in 2011, the first motivation for them was completely Islamic motivation to fight inside that. This is the first factor I want to stop with out of the narrative that is being distributed internationally about like jihadist Islamist radicals. We cannot deny the fact that yes, this group is fighting for Islamic reasons, but like it's quite different. We are not talking, people are mixing the whole thing. We're not talking about Al Qaeda here because, like, what they have right now, even Al Nusra back then with Al Qaeda was a fighting agreement that doesn't make them obey for all the ideologies of Al Qaeda itself. So we're not talking about the main branch of Al Qaeda and their ideologies. We are talking about like a new style that fit the Syrian revolution that happened in the country with their project that it was quite similar for like supporting religious reasons. But back 2011, we can say that Jabhat al-Nusra or Al-Qaeda, it was one of the most groups that they were making advanced on the front line. Their fighters were just like making difference when they were there because they were motivated with that ideology. They were fighting. They were well trained more than the Free Syrian Army back to the expert that they had from like they were sharing a lot of experience with former fighters who used to even fight in Afghanistan, in Shishan. So like you have like 40 years or more than 40 years of experience on 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 a similar context, like city style of fighting. So this Hayat Tahrir Sham, now Hayat Tahrir Sham, it seems to be like more hybrid with the revolutionary project that they have. And this is something happening on the ground and also happening on the media message that they are trying to send. So, like, just one example now, if we are seeing Hayat Tahrir Sham as spokespeople, we have two styles. The first one is a masked guy who is just like talking about jihad and arguing people to fight for Islam and everything. And then you have like the other face, which like Hassan Abdul Ghani, the spokesperson also of this. The guy is unmasked. He's just talking about like freedom, liberation, bringing back people to their homes, making Syria free again, which like it's quite different speech from Hayat Tahrir Sham. And this is something that we need to notice because like as someone who worked for the Western media, yeah, whatever we're trying to do, whatever we're trying to reflect the what's happening on the ground, we are always finding our reports being introduced by Hayat Tahrir Sham, the most extremism group on the ground, and they are leading the whole thing, forgetting that there are other groups that I'm gonna also mention now. But like this kind of speech is just like so risky It's so risky and it doesn't reflect what's going on the ground. Because like no, the battle mainly, if we're talking individually on the fighters, there are people who want to go back to their homes. They are fighting to go back to their homes. It gives like a great spark for the Syrian Revolution project that now cities are being controlled by the rebels again, and like it's so useful as we are seeing not only for the people who are supporting the revolution, for the people who their lives were stuck just under a small group of warlords in Assad regime areas, and they couldn't even leave. So it's so important. Thanks for giving that chance. It's so important, just like to notice that we are having an audience that it like a lot of information, and now with all of this mess, we're just like giving 5% of it. If we're talking about Tahrir Sham, if we're just like managing the whole battle and the whole reason with the word Hayat Tahrir Sham, the most radical Islamist group in Syria, we're just like deleting any chance to explain the rest of the narrative. Right. And yeah, as journalist who works there, I can say that it's not even something we can control as journalists. But like we cannot control such a thing. We're just like need to be more aware about what kind of trends that we are creating there. With the I don't know if you have any questions about Tahrir Sham themselves.
Yeah, I was going to ask the next one because, as you've mentioned with the HTS, they've obviously they will go back to Al Nusra in 2011, but then they broke with Al Qaeda. And obviously, two messages being pushed out, but there is also a difference in how they operate now. I mean, of course, if we think to Idlib, there have been demonstrations against HTS and their rule in Idlib. At the same time, we have seen changes in the way that they choose to govern or are running things in Idlib. So we do see, for example, more, let's say, technocratic governance happening. I mean, I was reading about their COVID response was quite fast. And now we sort of see them repairing churches and at least what they're releasing. And they have released statements talking about free Syria, but all sects are welcome, in New Syria. They're a part of the New Syria. We see a very different kind of message coming out of them, and even in some of their practices in the last couple of years. Not to say that there is still not the things happening in Idlib which are repressive, but we also see a shift happening too. Could you perhaps tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, we're talking about the style of HTS and especially the style of Idlib, and with the comparing of the other areas in Syria. So like we have like mainly four governance style now in Syria, or three mainly, because like ISIS isn't operating on the ground that heavy. They're not controlling cities. But like if we're talking about like the four main things, we're talking about Assad regime style. We're talking about the SNA or the Turkish-backed Syrian National Army areas in northern Aleppo. We're talking about the Syrian Democratic Forces that is backed by US and the northeast of Syria. And we're talking about HTS that it's not clear who they are big one. That's right. So like, but like we can consider that it's the only independent project inside Syria right now, because like we have no clear links to any foreign powers that is controlling them, and I think that gives them a big advantage to create their own governance style, especially about the Hukumat al-Anfaz or the government that they created and the rescue government that they created in Idlib and is operating there. If you are diving inside this kind of style for governance, it's quite working well. But like I need to mention something right here. We are not talking about something out of the dictatorship. Like the first style that we are talking about the first style of governance is dictatorships. But like now the situation is that dire or that tough that we need to compare dictatorships and pick the less worst of them. So if we are talking about the less worst, I would say that it's the style of Idlib, taking into account that there are a lot of missing people inside HTS prisons also. They face the demonstrations against them, against their governance, against Abdulhamid al-Jolani, that is just like happening since 7 months ago in Idlib. They faced them with power, with bullets, with arresting people and everything. They tried to push too much inside being that technocratic or more practical governance. Uh, but they could adapt so fast. Like for example, if we want to just like two examples that is happening and show that how fast HTS governance project could shift it. That now they with this button they create a whole office and department responsible about the defected soldiers of Assad regime. Like this one is just like defected for defected soldiers that you have nothing inside fighting for the department that is working there. They're just like following this specific case. It shows a lot of flexibility inside the governance style. Also, like we were talking about like another governance change that they made, that the first thing that now happened in Aleppo, controlling the police stations and activating them, assigning a number for complaints. Just like if any robbing attempts, if any civilian is being bitten or being stopped, so like you have a number to call to just report about this and wait till it's being taken action. One of the things that they did, like they made a curfew from 7 to 7 a.m. Yeah, it's implemented on the soldiers to not only the civilians, just in a time that they know that even inside this group, there are bad people. Also, they could threaten someone or something like that. So that's why, like now in Aleppo, there's like a full curfew at night. Just like they're taking their time on they're adapting inside the situation, just like to contain the damage and to protect their image, because like it's their image right now. It's so sensitive moment for it, especially if when they are trying so much to push toward like they could be a reliable partner for international community that are trying to get out of the mentality of being just like jihadist extremism or something like that, and they are doing something on the ground just to show that. I couldn't say that it's 100% true. No, I would just like give a percentage of just like 70% of those kinds of actions that it's being exported to the community. It's it's active action. It's active action. It's protecting someone. Even if the main goal of it for HTS, for our talking, the main goal of it is just like to make like kind of reputation laundry. But like it's something if being reflected on the ground. So like that's better than a full mess. That it's once it's like a full mess. When I'm saying a full mess, I'm not saying talking about the battle and the method. I'm talking about like years of Assad control inside the Aleppo. So like anyone could be arrested, anyone could be just like robbed, or anyone can be for any reason. And we're not talking about the government itself of Assad. We're talking about the Iranians, foreigners who have the right to do all of this against local people. Just because they have arms, they have like a lot of agreements and approval from the regime.
Yes, indeed. And we should now get on to the question of backing, because, of course, as soon as this started, people started asking, well, what does Turkey want from all of this? But from what we can sort of tell from the original offensive, and maybe you could help us out here, when it started, it doesn't feel like Turkey wanted this offensive to happen, despite what some people are writing online. In fact, there was discussion that there was meant to have been maybe launched a month ago, but Turkey intervened to say don't do it. And then after the offensive launched, and it was showing to be rapidly successful, suddenly Turkey gets involved and sends the Syrian National Army, which is the umbrella groups that they control, to enter into the conflict as well. So could you perhaps tell us about the relationship to Turkey to all of this?
Okay. So for just like if we need to understand the position of Turkey right now, we need to understand the position of the Syrian National Army or the SNA. Back then, even before the battle, that the Syrian National Army, just like or known as SNA, it's being known that it's just like a Turkish tool that is being implemented inside the Syrian territory. But like diving inside them is still the same names of the Syrian National Army, that is the remains of the FSA. They were operating already with their groups inside HTS controlled areas. So like what if we're talking about like cities like Al Atarab or Taftanaz or other cities of Idlib that it's governed by HTS mainly, you could find even before what's going on right now, you could find some groups for the FNA. They were sharing the same names. They weren't backed by Turkey back then because Turkey was focusing on northern Aleppo mostly, and Azaz and Jarablus. Yes, those FNA they were following to Turkey, but like we cannot say that the whole name of the Syrian National Army is followed or ruled by Turkey following only the orders. Regarding this exact battle, since the beginning of it, Turkey didn't spend anything for the battle of that's going on by the military under the name of the military operations room. There was just like another battle that is being opened after 3 or 4 days by the original Turkish groups, the from SNA, which like it was called in a different name, and now they are fighting directly against the SDF, which align with the Turkish policies inside the area more. And but if we're talking about like the groups itself, that it's being has been fighting since 27th of November. So out of the HTS, and we talked about it a lot, we're talking about like mostly 30,000 fighters for HTS. But like you still on the ground, there are more than 30,000, way more than this. So we're talking like about like other groups that it's mainly HTS, the leadership, and also like we're talking about the National Front of Liberation, and we are talking about the Syrian National Army itself. We are talking about Ahrar Sham, the remains of Ahrar Sham, which like it's also still a big group. There, we are talking about Jaish al-Azza, and we are talking about Nuruddin Zinki. Like so, mainly it's fixed names, but like for the fighting groups on the ground, you are talking about like more than 27 smaller groups. That's 27 smaller groups that it has two kinds of decision making. First one is for the group itself. The second one is for the operational room that's managing the whole thing. We are just like if we wanna just like dive inside why it's completely different even for the ideology inside this. If we wanna consider like the HTS ideology right now, it's kind of hybrid between the Islamic project that they have and also fighting for the Syrian revolution. Ahrar Sham, it's also like hybrid since it's their own project that they start with a national Islamic project. It wasn't that extremism like the one Al-Nusra used to have, but like it's also like having some Islamic roots, but like they have a lot of people from the area also. If we're talking about like one of the most important, I found them inside this battle, Jaish al-Azza. Jaish al-Azza is mainly like the main fighters inside this army are defected officers and soldiers from the Assad region. So we're talking about like they were receiving fund or even military fund from US back to 2015 when they start working. They start earlier, but like the shifting point was back to 2015 where they were receiving military funds from US itself, especially for the anti aircraft weapons back then. So we are talking about like a military experience for this arm because like we are talking about like the same defected soldiers and officers who used to fight in Assad army, and now they bring all of this experience into the rebel side. If we want just like talk about the front, the National Front of Liberation, which like is quite interesting for the ideology part. This front was created just to confront HTS itself. So like at some point back 2018, if I remember correctly, HTS, they were trying to implement a lot of battles and clash against the other armed groups in aiming to control the whole area of Idlib. So the other groups they needed to be allied and also to make one front to fight this ideology or this project for HTS. So they created like what's known now. It's the National Front of Liberation, and it's quite interesting to see both of them now fighting for the same goal inside the same operation room and coordinating with each other for this. Nuruddin Zinki is an old name that we stopped hearing since they were mostly under the sanctions a lot because like they were involved in back 2015, 16 in Aleppo. They were involved in a lot of crimes against humanity. So the name itself just moved out of the front. Today we are seeing that their fighters mainly motivated by getting back to their cities that they used to live in, they came from, and now they are fighting on the same front lines. So that we're talking about like mainly, yeah, it's something like western and southern fronts inside Aleppo that were open, but like mainly it was one coordinating room, and it's quite interesting to see like how groups from different backgrounds with different ideologies that most of them used to fight each other within the past years. Now they are just like coordinating in one fight under one name just to fight against the region, which like it was the first slogan that it was created for the whole thing. For the Nusra back then, for the Free Syrian Army groups, that now it's known by National Syrian Army, which like is Turkey mainly. But now back to the National Syrian Army or SNA, they are making their own battle, and things start to be intense between them and the other battle. Because like they didn't want to coordinate a lot. They want to focus on fighting the SDF because like clearly now Turkey decided to get involved by directing them, but like directing not inside the same battle, but like inside the other battle for the main action that's happening against Aleppo and everything. I can say that the all the armed groups they received nothing from Turkey, and that's true from inside the operation room itself. But I cannot say that Turkey didn't give a green light for this, especially with the dead end that they reached with the political process with Assad regime, because they were trying to push inside this normalization a lot. But like Assad regime backed by Iran back then, they were refusing all the attempts that Russia was trying to make between Turkey and Syria. But like Assad back then, he didn't even have the choice for this. So Iranian was deciding that no, you are not going to Turkey for this. So that's why they were refusing a lot. After all of those dead ends that all the attempts of Turkey and Erdogan faced, they were so happy to see such an operation that would put Bashar al-Assad and this regime and under like a lot of military pressure that could push him toward that normalization more.
And there's very little, because I mean, obviously, you've seen the online discourse around this, and a lot of people are seeing this through the prism of Israel and the US. So, what do we think there? I mean, is there any evidence of their role in any of this? And if not, does this align with their interests? What is this? What should we make of this?
Mainly, I would say that there's no Israeli or US involvement inside this. One of them, like for two main reasons, I'm going to mention. The first one, that since October 7th, we saw what Israel is able to do. Like we are seeing a lot of genocides, we are seeing a lot of destruction, we are seeing a lot of crushing for other armed groups, especially like Hezbollah. Hezbollah leadership is completely crushed. Israel didn't need anyone to crush Hezbollah leadership, and Israel didn't need anyone to make all the crimes inside Gaza that they did inside Gaza. So now it doesn't make sense that Israel will need like 50,000 fighters who are just like they don't have that great military operation experience. They don't have. They used to fight in their own country. The project inside Syria, like that's like a wrong vision. That we are seeing the whole area, and we are thinking that all the wars there are linked together. What's happening right now in Syria, it's even like way older than what happened in Gaza or Lebanon. It's a project of 2011. And I don't see any signs on the ground that Israel or US give even give a permission for that. So like if we want to compare like the amount of airstrikes that Israel used to do in Damascus before the battle started, before 27th of November, it's quite reduced because like we had weekly or we had like every 2 3 days there was a massive airstrike by Israel on Damascus or in east of Syria. Now we are not seeing that. So like I wouldn't say that they don't want to make it clear, but like if they are continuing to make the same airstrikes, it will be a sign for yes, they are supporting this kind of operations. They have hands inside this. But like even this kind of airstrikes or targeting completely stopped because like they see that there's something massive on the ground. They don't want to get involved inside this, especially with all of those fronts that's being opened. Then the second reason that if you're watching all the videos that is being distributed on the internet for what the fighters are carrying from weapons, what they are using for bombing to make an advance, what they are using for protecting themselves, the style of operation itself. It doesn't mention anything about like something so advanced. Like even like if we're talking about the most uh, unique weapon that is being used now, it's the Shaheen drone. The Shaheen drones is just like something could be easily manufactured in Idlib. And when we are talking about Idlib, we are not talking about like only like some guys who are just like trying to do some experiments for making weapons. We are talking about like a whole foundation that inside the governance of HTS was made and was operating since at least 7 years to make weapons. We are talking about Amjad Foundation inside this, which like now it's already produced like the Shaheen drones, military drones, that it's being targeted a lot, and it was a major thing, changed the whole pattern of it. We are talking about like even robot cars and small vehicles to bomb. We are talking about like being able to produce even weapons, individual weapons, being able to produce heavy one, rockets for the bombing, the shelling tools, and everything. That it's something it's hard to understand from outside, but like once you are just like getting the geopolitical thing inside the area and knowing that there's an open market even to get the parts for this through Turkey or through Iraq by money, or if you have money, the financial stability for this. So it's so easy within that context to get the parts to manufacture whatever they need for this pattern. I would say like if they have like really advanced air system right now, that yes, this something cannot be manufactured inside here. But like till now, there's nothing mentioned that there's nothing mentioned that, especially if we're talking about the other part that we were talking about it, about the financial source of it. Financial source, like the financial sources that HTS was controlling in Idlib is quite massive. Like it's quite massive. We're talking about like controlling the oil inside the city, inside the whole area, not only the city, by a foundation called Watad, which like controlling the oil trade and the whole city. We're talking about like taxes that it's being implemented in every dealership there. And it's a lot of money. We're talking about like also controlling the smuggling ways by for the human smuggling between Syria and Turkey, then they're controlling a big part of the border. So yes, a part of that money that smugglers were taking, it was going to Asia. So and we're talking about the trade with Turkey, the exporting and the importing one. So like if there's the finance source, if there's the knowledge of creating such weapons, if there's also the part from the open market though, so I don't see why they need Israel or US to support such a battle, especially if it's depending on the ground. It's a battle of numbers of people of fighting. Like what made them take Aleppo is the withdrawal of Assad. If the numbers of soldiers stayed there, it would be tough, and that's what we are seeing in Hamas. There's not that unique weapon that changed the whole battle.
Indeed, and also it's not really clear, even if, let's say, that claim was true, it's not clear what Israel would even want from something like this, because at the end of the day, Assad has not been a bad for them, has he? I mean, he's even before the revolution of 2011, he was himself trying to normalize with Israel, which is often forgotten. But I now want to sort of turn to the Syrian people themselves. I mean, obviously, this has been, as you've said, everyone's been in shock and surprised by all of this. Obviously, a lot of people from Aleppo were participating in the operation. They came from these areas. But for people obviously not participating in the operation, from Syrians just generally, what is the sort of feeling about all of this? What do people think about all what's happening?
So mainly if we're talking about the people of Aleppo, inside Aleppo, that now just like all the information that it's getting is just like a new thing for them. Especially if we're talking about like areas or neighborhoods are weren't controlled by the rebels before. So like it's a complete different style. A lot of them were terrified. We're talking about a lot of people who just like prefer to be displaced, and we don't even have the complete number of it. But like if we are talking about like a number that is being counted, and that people from Aleppo or countryside, that it's being displaced inside Idlib. So the last number we are talking about like more than 11,000 family, which like it's more than 57 thousand people that decide just like to move out, till, mainly because of the airstrikes and bombing that's happening. They decide to move out to Idlib, which to the northern countryside of Idlib, since it's less bombed, because Idlib, the city and countryside, is being bombed by Assad again and by Russia. Uh, Many others, like even the people who decide to stay in the city, you can say that there's still like a kind of feeling new, uh, like feeling confused also. They don't like, especially for those who are not involved in the behave of revolution or Assad. We are talking about like a lot of people who are just like they didn't have a political opinion aside that. So now you're like, okay, you are seeing that the videos, you are seeing like having video calls with guys, journalists on the ground, and you are just like seeing it and the people faces. People are just like walking in the street. They are kind of lost. But like you have also some people who just like start to get adapted, and I think it's a matter of time, just like to get what happened. Because like we cannot push them inside this. You cannot blame them because like even for the rebels themselves, they weren't planning to take Aleppo city. I said like what happened, it was just like a result of the ground said after 27th of November. But like they weren't planning to get all of this. But like with all of those losers, with the high support that they get from the people, with all of this just like withdrawals also from the Assad regime. So yeah, they ended in Aleppo. So like you cannot blame the people or describe what they are feeling if you cannot even describe the people who attacked them.
Indeed.
And
So,
like one more point just about the displacement itself, that you have like also another group of Alip people who decided to go to Damascus. Now we are talking about um, some point of views from inside Damascus, and everyone is just like quite disappointed, quite shocked, because like with all of that media campaign that Assad regime used to give when the Lebanese refugees came within the last war. So hotels were opened mainly for Lebanese refugees who came, but like mostly it was opened by Iran for families and related for relatives of guys fighting for Hezbollah. I did a report for ARTE for this, and like it was quite you don't feel that you are in Syria anymore because even the image of Hassan Nasrallah and Khamenei is more than the pictures of Bashar al-Assad and them. So like now, people from Aleppo are just like arriving Damascus to find shelter, but like mainly they are sleeping in the street. No one even asking them what they need. Even like for some local NGOs, small groups, they are trying to do something, and they cannot even get the permission from the region to act. So like you are just like want to compare two styles. The first one was completely managed by Iranians because like it was in the good thing of Hezbollah or what's going on. And the second one is just like completely Syrians, displacement inside Syria itself, and no one care about it.
So my last question then it relates to what's going to happen now. What do you see as happening? And sort of adjacent to that question, could something like this happen with Damascus?
I think it's quite far of this, and I think like it's so early to decide such a thing for main two reasons. We so far has seen the action. We didn't see the reaction yet. Like especially now with the controlling map changing inside Hama. So like you cannot like yes, it has been like 5 6 days, but like a lot of like you can feel that three battles that happened inside. A battle start just like take control to defend the people, taking some parts from the countryside, and then the second one it ended with taking the second biggest city, which is like Aleppo in Syria. The third one now is like being a real battle more that it's happening around Hama because now the regime and Iran decide to fight more for this. So I'm pretty sure that rebels have good chances in Hama right now because, like, despite all of this that's happening right now, yeah, they are still making progress with high costs. Yeah, because like a lot of people that we know, a lot of fighters are losing their lives right now. More journalists also like two great journalists were lost in this. Like those who we know personally, like Mustafa Sarut, he lost his life in Aleppo just like 3 days ago, and today we are just like receiving the news of Anas, who was killed by an airstrike by the Assad regime, around Hama, and like I'm talking with some other guys who were just like at the same point of Anas. All of them were wearing the vest like they are journalists just like press or something like that. And they were just like, the airstrike targeted us. Like it was just like 20 meters from where they were standing. So like it's really hard to predict right now what's going on. But like if we are talking about the style of south of Syria, especially Damascus and Daraa, the most likely or the more believable style that is going to happen that the former armed groups of FSA that made the reconciliation after Assad regime took the area, they will make a move. They already start to make some attacks, some demonstrations. They were expressing their feelings about their supporting what's going on in the north, opened by the main battle. But like most likely, they will do something to create the tension, especially if we're talking about Daraa itself. Daraa itself isn't controlled directly by the Assad regime forces. It's controlled by the fifth division, which like it's mainly the former FSA fighters, and it's controlled by the military police of Russia. So like you don't have that presence on the ground itself. And I believe it's just like a matter of time that those former rebels will be shifted further. Because the main reason that they did that reconciliation and they accepted that kind of agreement was the lack of support that they had back then. But like now we're talking about groups that are not being called as FSA. Most of them, from personal communicating, they still believe in the revolution and what they were doing, armed. They still have their arms, weapons, and their military capacity. And it's just like, I believe it's just like a matter of time that we're not waiting something in Damascus or in the south coming from the north. We're waiting something from within. That happened on the night of that so-called coup, but like it didn't work out because like the groups were so small, Iranians were so fast to contain the situation and control it because like they are treating them in their houses instead Zainab. But like I'm kind of pretty sure that something coming in this.
Hussam Hammoud, thank you for talking to us at Memo Conversations.
Thanks so much for this host and hope just like to keep following with this. A lot of norms are quite needed to be changed, especially for the Western audience that it has been like 13 or 14 years it's being hearing a quite specific story about Syria, and now all of this story are changing on the ground. Thanks so much for delivering that.
And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to catch up with this one or see previous Memo Conversations, you can go to our website, but please do tune in next time for more Memo Conversations.
This was Middle East Monitor Conversations, brought to you by the Middle East Monitor in London.